I need you to understand something, Emily. You were a placeholder, a quiet face I could bring to dinners without worrying you'd embarrass me. But I'm done settling. So take what's on the table and don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've got no money, no lawyer, and no leverage. You're a nurse. What exactly do you think you're going to do? That's what he said to her. In a hospital his mother built with her bare hands. Behind a desk he didn't earn. To a woman who spent every night saving strangers' lives while he spent every night in another woman's bed. No alimony, no house, no claim to anything. Just a signature line and a door. What Ryan Carter didn't know was that the woman he was throwing away was the only person in his entire family who could destroy him, and she had every reason to. This is the story of the nurse they all underestimated. Carter Medical Center was one of the most respected hospital networks in the Gulf Coast region. 3 locations, over 2,000 employees. And at the top of it all was Ryan Carter, 35 years old, tailored suits, magazine covers, and a smile that could convince anyone he was the future of American healthcare. He had taken over as CEO from his mother Margaret 2 years earlier. The press loved him, the board adored him. But behind that polished exterior was a man who had learned very early that charm was a weapon. His wife Emily had been a surgical nurse at Carter Medical for almost 8 years. Surgeons requested her by name. Residents came to her for guidance. Patients sent handwritten thank you cards to the nursing station addressed specifically to her. But none of that mattered in the Carter household. At family dinners, Emily was the one who set the table and cleared the plates. Ryan's cousins referred to her as the quiet one. His uncle once asked her at Thanksgiving dinner if she was still doing that little hospital job. She never responded with anger. She simply absorbed it, the way she absorbed everything, calmly, carefully, watching. On a Tuesday afternoon in March, Ryan sent Emily a text asking her to come to his office after her shift. No explanation, just the time and the room number. When she arrived, Ryan was sitting behind his mahogany desk, a folder placed neatly in front of him. He didn't stand, he didn't greet her, he slid the folder across the desk. "I had the lawyers draft this last week. It's clean and straightforward. You should read through it tonight." Emily opened the folder. Divorce papers. No alimony. The house on Briar Hollow Lane remained in his name. She would sign away any future claim to equity in Carter Medical, and a strict non-disclosure agreement at the bottom. She read every word. Ryan leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "I know this isn't easy, but let's be honest. We've been going through the motions for a long time. I need someone beside me who understands the world I'm operating in. Board meetings, investor dinners, fundraisers. You're a wonderful person, Emily, but you're a nurse. You don't understand how things work at this level." Emily didn't flinch. She closed the folder and looked at him directly. "I'll sign." Ryan blinked. He hadn't expected it to be that simple. "But I have one condition," she said. He raised his eyebrows. "I'll take your mother." Ryan leaned forward slightly. His expression shifted from surprise to something closer to relief. Margaret Carter was 70 years old and had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia 2 years earlier. She rarely attended board meetings anymore. To Ryan, his mother had become an inconvenience, a name on trust documents that required periodic legal maintenance. "Fine," he said without hesitation. "I'll have the team arrange the transition." He said it the same way he might approve a supply order. Emily stood, tucked the folder under her arm, and walked out without another word. Ryan watched her leave and shook his head slightly. He reached for his phone and typed a message. "It's done." She didn't even put up a fight. The message was to Chloe Anderson, 28 years old, marketing director at Carter Medical, and for the past 14 months, Ryan's affair partner. What Ryan didn't realize in that moment was that he had just made the most catastrophic decision of his life. Not the divorce, giving away his mother. Emily moved into a modest townhouse in Montrose, a neighborhood on Houston's west side. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a backyard barely big enough for a folding chair. But it was hers. Margaret arrived the following weekend. A private car service dropped her off with 2 suitcases and a box of personal documents. Emily helped her inside, set up the guest bedroom, and made a pot of chamomile tea. Margaret sat quietly at the kitchen table. She stared at the teacup for a long time. Then she spoke. Her voice was not confused. It was not fragile. It was clear, steady, and deliberate. "Emily, we can stop pretending now." Emily set her own cup down slowly. Margaret looked at her directly. "I don't have dementia. I never did. I've been pretending for 2 years because I needed everyone to believe I was no longer paying attention." The kitchen was silent. Emily's hands stayed perfectly still on the table. Margaret continued. "When Ryan took over as CEO, I noticed things almost immediately. Budget lines that didn't match, vendor contracts with terms I never approved, payments going to companies I had never heard of. Every time I raised a concern, Ryan dismissed it. He told me I was confused. He suggested to the board that I was becoming unreliable." She took a slow breath. "So I made a decision. If they wanted to believe I was losing my mind, I would let them. And while they stopped watching me, I would watch them." Margaret reached into the box she had brought with her and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside were copies of pharmaceutical rebate contracts that violated federal anti-kickback statutes, altered accounting reports with reclassified budget lines designed to hide payments, transcripts of recorded boardroom conversations, and audio recordings, clear, time-stamped, unmistakable, of Ryan's own voice, admitting he had accepted payments from pharmaceutical vendors in exchange for exclusive formulary placement. Margaret placed the envelope on the table between them. "I didn't know who I could trust. The board is loyal to him. The lawyers report to him. Every person in that building has a reason to protect my son." She looked at Emily. "Except you." Emily stared at the documents. Her pulse was steady. Her breathing was even, because she had spent her entire career staying calm when everything around her was falling apart. "How long have you known?" Emily asked quietly. "I confirmed it about 14 months ago. I've been collecting evidence since then, but I couldn't act from inside that house. I needed to be somewhere no one would look." She folded her hands. "When you told Ryan you wanted to take me, I knew you were the one." Emily looked at the woman sitting across from her. 70 years old, founder of one of the largest hospital networks in Texas, written off by her own son, and sharper than anyone in that boardroom. The next morning, Margaret spread a set of legal documents across the kitchen table. These were not hospital financials. They were the original trust documents for Carter Medical Center. Margaret had founded the hospital 32 years ago, starting with a single urgent care clinic in 3rd Ward. She had built it from the ground up, a Black woman running a medical facility in Houston when no one believed it was possible. She had grown it into a 3-campus network, and she had never given it away. "Ryan thinks he owns this hospital," Margaret said calmly. "He doesn't. He never did." The trust documents made it clear. 52% of Carter Medical Center was held in Margaret's private family trust. Ryan had been appointed CEO. He had operational authority, but ownership had never transferred. And buried in the trust's governance section was a clause that most people had never bothered to read. Article 7, Section 3. In the event that the acting CEO engages in documented financial misconduct, ethical violations, or actions resulting in patient endangerment, executive authority may be immediately suspended by activation of the trust's oversight provision. And the enforcement mechanism was specific. Activation may be initiated by any direct family member who is actively and currently engaged in patient care within the Carter Medical Network. Margaret looked at Emily. "Ryan can't activate it. He's an administrator. The board members can't. They're not family. His cousins aren't employed at the hospital." She paused. "You are still a registered nurse at Carter Medical. You are still legally my daughter-in-law until the divorce is finalized. You are the only person who qualifies." Emily read the clause 3 times. Every word was precise. Every condition was met. "The lawyers who drafted this clause 30 years ago," Margaret said, "did it because I wanted to make sure that no executive could ever put profits above patients. I built this hospital to serve people, not to make someone rich. Emily set the document down. What do you need me to do? Margaret's expression didn't change. I need you to do what you've always done. Tell the truth, follow the rules, and don't back down when powerful people try to make you feel small. Emily filed a formal internal ethics complaint with the hospital's compliance office on a Wednesday morning. She submitted the complaint under her name. No anonymous tip line, no third-party attorney. Her name, her employee ID, her signature. The complaint was 12 pages long. It detailed pharmaceutical rebate agreements violating federal anti-kickback statutes. It included altered accounting documents with original and modified versions side by side. It referenced recorded conversations with dates and participants. It outlined a pattern of financial misconduct spanning 22 months. The compliance officer read the first 3 pages and called the hospital's general counsel. By the end of the week, federal healthcare regulators had been notified. What happened next moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, a formal investigation was launched by the Office of Inspector General. Pharmaceutical rebate agreements were frozen, hospital accounts were partially locked, and an audit revealed that Chloe Anderson had personally authorized over $2.1 million in corporate expenditures with no legitimate business purpose. The Houston Chronicle ran the story first. The headline was simple: Carter Medical Center CEO faces federal probe over kickback allegations. Other outlets followed within hours. Local news crews parked outside the hospital. Social media exploded. Ryan Carter held a press conference in the hospital's main lobby. He stood behind a podium with the Carter Medical logo displayed prominently behind him. He stumbled over his prepared statement. He contradicted himself when asked about the rebate contracts. He referred to the allegations as a misunderstanding, then corrected himself and called them a coordinated attack. A reporter asked him directly if he had accepted payments from pharmaceutical vendors. He paused for 6 seconds. I am confident that the investigation will show that Carter Medical Center has always operated with the highest ethical standards. It was the kind of answer that answered nothing. For the first time in his career, Ryan Carter looked small. Margaret Carter had not attended a board meeting in over 2 years. When she walked into the conference room on the 14th floor, several board members physically stood up in surprise. She was dressed in a charcoal gray suit. Her posture was straight, her eyes were clear. She took her seat at the head of the table. The room was silent. Ryan was sitting at the opposite end. His attorney was beside him. Margaret opened a leather folder and placed it in front of her. I am invoking Article 7, Section 3 of the Carter Medical Center Family Trust. Effective immediately, Ryan Carter is suspended from all executive duties pending the outcome of the federal investigation. The room erupted. One board member stood and pointed at Emily, who was seated to Margaret's right. You can't be serious. She's a nurse. She has no business being involved in executive governance. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She understands this hospital better than any of you. She has spent 8 years in its operating rooms. She has caught errors that would have cost lives. And unlike anyone else in this room, she has never put her own interests above the people we serve. The board member sat down. Margaret continued. Under the terms of the trust, I am appointing Emily Carter as interim CEO. This is not a symbolic gesture. It is a legal action supported by the trust's governance provisions. If any member of this board wishes to challenge it, I welcome you to consult your attorneys. But I assure you, this clause has been reviewed and it is enforceable. Ryan's attorney leaned over and whispered something. Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked across the table at Emily. She met his gaze evenly. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply looked at him the way she had looked at him for 7 years, with complete and total clarity. Emily Carter did not walk into the CEO's office and hang new curtains. She did not give speeches about justice or revenge. She did not fire people to make a point. She went to work. She terminated every pharmaceutical rebate agreement flagged in the investigation. She implemented a transparent financial oversight system, requiring dual approval for any expenditure over $10,000. She opened the hospital's quarterly reports to the public for the first time in the institution's history. She expanded nurse staffing ratios across all 3 campuses. She increased patient safety funding. She reinstated a mentorship program for nursing students from underserved communities that Ryan had quietly defunded. The changes were not dramatic. They were methodical, and they were effective. In the first 90 days, the hospital's stock value dropped by 11%. Investors were nervous. The media was skeptical. Several board members privately discussed replacing her. But Emily didn't panic. She provided detailed projections. She answered every question with data, not promises. By the 6-month mark, patient satisfaction scores had risen by 23%. Staff turnover dropped to its lowest level in a decade, and the hospital received 0 compliance violations for the first time in 3 years. Carter Medical Center was voted most trusted regional hospital by a National Healthcare Review Board. The announcement was covered by every major outlet in the state. Emily didn't hold a press conference. She was in the operating room that morning, assisting with a routine procedure because she had never stopped being a nurse. When a reporter asked her later how it felt to receive the honor, she said simply, "It feels like the hospital is finally doing what it was built to do." Chloe Anderson was the first to fall. The audit revealed a pattern of financial abuse so blatant that even the hospital's most lenient attorneys couldn't soften the findings. Over $2.1 million charged to corporate cards for personal expenses. Designer handbags, first-class flights, a vacation to the Maldives billed as a brand development retreat. Chloe was terminated and sued by the hospital to recover the funds. She claimed on local television that she had been acting under Ryan's direction, that he had authorized every expense, that she was a scapegoat. The reporter asked if she had any proof. She didn't. Ryan's situation was worse. The federal investigation resulted in multiple civil penalties. His medical board certification came under formal review. Former business partners filed lawsuits alleging breach of fiduciary duty. His attorney negotiated a settlement that included financial restitution and a permanent ban from holding executive positions in any federally funded healthcare institution. His name was removed from the donor wall and his portrait taken down from the executive hallway. The hospital's leadership page was updated. One name, Emily Carter, interim chief executive officer and registered nurse. 1 year after the divorce papers were signed in that conference room, Emily stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. She had been invited to speak at the National Healthcare Leadership Summit, an annual gathering of hospital executives and medical professionals from across the country. She spoke without notes. She talked about the hospital her mother-in-law built from a single clinic in 3rd Ward. She talked about what happens when institutions forget who they serve. She talked about the nurses and technicians and cleaning staff who keep hospitals alive while executives take the credit. She did not mention Ryan by name. She didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew the story. When she finished, the audience stood. The applause lasted nearly 2 minutes. After the event, as Emily was leaving through a side corridor, a voice stopped her. "Emily." She turned. Ryan was standing near the exit. He was thinner than she remembered. His suit didn't fit the way it used to. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. He looked at her for a long time. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. Emily studied him. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt something closer to stillness. "You didn't make a mistake, Ryan. You made a choice. Every day for 2 years you chose to lie, to steal, and to treat the people around you like they were beneath you." She paused. "You looked at me across that dinner table and decided I was nothing. Not because I failed, but because I was a nurse. Because I wasn't loud enough." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but she wasn't finished. "I was never just a nurse. I was the person holding your mother's hospital together while you were tearing it apart. And I didn't need a title or a corner office to do it. I just needed to show up and do the right thing." She straightened her jacket. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Ryan, but you won't find it by looking backward. She walked out through the double doors. The evening air in Washington was cool. Emily Carter stepped into the night, steady as always. Behind her was a marriage that had tried to make her invisible, a family that had treated her like an afterthought. Ahead of her was a hospital finally living up to its name, a legacy being honored instead of exploited, and a life that belonged entirely to her. She didn't look back. She never needed to. Emily Carter was handed divorce papers and told she was nothing more than a nurse. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply took the one thing no one else wanted, her mother-in-law, and walked out the door. What Ryan Carter didn't know was that his mother had never lost her mind. She had been watching, collecting, waiting, and the only person she trusted was the woman her son had thrown away. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought their title made them better than you? Have you ever been the quiet one in the room who saw everything but said nothing? Tell me your story in the comments, and if this one made you feel something, hit that subscribe button. Because on this channel, the ones they overlook are always the ones who win.